Here we go.
Oh man, now I have to behave because I'm being recorded. All right. All right. So here we go. Thanks you guys for follows. Long time speaker, I guess first time. No, have I been there? I think I've spoken to you guys before. Maybe second time call. I don't know. I work for a company called ExtraHop. I have been doing this security thing for entirely too many years. Um, at present, I am the Vice President of Client Engagement and Strategic Initiatives at ExtraHop. Uh, One of the things that I spent a lot of time on is metrics and all the ways that we show output of work. So value realization, kind of how to show somebody that you've done something. And I don't know how many of you guys had the opportunity, but in the write up, I put a link to the talk I gave. God, it's been forever. But in Nashville, and oddly enough, I think it was like 2011, so it's been a long time. But on a regular basis, I get messages about, "Hey, are you ever going to update this talk? Is it still relevant? Can you talk about it?" So at least once or twice a quarter, I get emails, and so I figured, what the hell, let's do it. So this talk is titled "Your Metrics Suck and What You Can Do About It." Um, I think generally speaking, I split this up into four sections. Yes, there's a lot of slides. No, there's not going to be a whole lot to read, and there are funny pictures to make sure that you are still paying attention. If you've seen me speak before, maybe you know what's coming. So, all right, metrics generally suck, and I think the evidence is everywhere. And let's start with a very brief exercise. Uh, I want you guys, since I'm not in the room, I just want you guys to look at the following chart and just think about like what it tells you, and we'll talk about it, or at least I'll talk about it. You guys can talk about it there. What does this say? By the way, bonus points if you're in the chat, if you can recognize what country that is, or how you'd know it for people of a certain age. All right. So you've stared at it for a minute, right? You've got developers and AI engineers. You've got the employment trends in Albania, which, if you don't know, that is the mythical country from Dilbert that they always have trouble with. Um, and so you can see this; these are the employment trends. So what does this graph actually tell us? Well, the reality is, no matter how long you stare at it, and this is my first, no, it's not one of my kids. It's a great baby photo, though. No matter how long you stare at this, that chart means pretty much absolutely nothing. Um, the irony of all of that is I couldn't tell you what it meant after staring at it a couple times. The problem is that chart has so much open to interpretation, right? There's just so much there that we can think about, look at, stare at. Everybody can develop their own narrative depending on what your background or experience is. It may mean something different to you. And maybe you saw this on LinkedIn because I copied that and made it, abstracted it a little bit. But this is something that went around LinkedIn for a while. If you follow Chris Hoff, he there was a whole bunch of people that commented on this. Some vibe coding dude presented this chart about how AI is cratering developer hiring. Never mind that the chart was all wrong and that it actually meant completely nothing in terms of data output and lessons learned. So the reality is, metrics are hard. But I have heard many times people say things like, "Well, we did better on this sprint." To which I say, "By what measure? Like, what does that mean? What does better even mean?" Right? And let's like, why do our metrics suck so much? And it's such a hard thing to get right. Sometimes it feels like you're just trying to convey a message, and you're like, I just want to show people that we did X amount of work and Y happened. Like, why is that such a hard thing? And the reality is because we use squishy words. Okay, we use words like better, right? And if you've used these, don't feel bad. I just did in an email this morning and caught myself. But listen for these words and ask yourself how many times you've used these, and then tell me what they mean, like, or tell yourself what they mean. What is better? What is easier? Anything? What is faster? Faster than what? How much faster? Faster when, where? Or more. That's my favorite one. People are like, oh, we did more. Like, what? More what? Right? But we use these in email, we use these in communications all day long. And the trouble with that is it doesn't necessarily convey any kind of certainty. It doesn't convey anything with authority. And we create these, metrics. I don't know if you guys have to report on these things, but I spend a lot of time creating metrics and charts and graphs for people to help them understand what better is. What does more mean? What is easier, right? How much is faster? Um, and there's a number of ways to think about this, but the language that we use really has a the way that we convey messages should be relatively straightforward and simple, and they're not. I think this is one of my key problems with cybersecurity. One of the reasons why we have these round and round and round discussions with leadership and such is that we use words that oftentimes that don't really mean anything, and then it becomes difficult to try to get the message out of it. And so, look, we also, by the way, use really bad charts like this one, right? Employment trends. Does this mean how many people were hired or fired? Does this mean how many net new people were hired or how many people are existing in this field? Like it doesn't say anything. There's just some lines, right? But people will put this up and tell you this is evidence of X, and you look at it and go, "No, it isn't. This means nothing to me." But in their heads, they are convinced that they've done the right work. So we love to overcomplicate it. We love to overcomplicate things as people. I think this is from a technology background or because we perpetually feel like we have something to prove and that we're really smart. And so to make things easier on ourselves and to sort of feel like we can prove that we're smart, we create these complicated graphs and charts and we create stuff like this. And this is actually a sales chart I've seen before. And somebody in this meeting, and the reason I put this one up is somebody in this meeting asked, and this happened to be the CEO of the company. Somebody asked, "Is Asia doing better, going up or down quarter over quarter?" Like when you look at this, right? This potentially shows a whole lot of information. But when you look at this and you're like, okay, what does this tell me about Asia? I think the answer is nothing that I can think of. The graph is uneven, so you don't know. You can't really tell Asia going up or down. I mean, is Africa doing better? Is Africa and Europe combined doing better than North America? Like, is South America better than Africa? Like, it's really hard to tell this thing. But somebody put this up. In fact, an executive put this up and was shocked when the CEO said, "This sucks. I can't tell what you're trying to tell me." We also do things like using far too many variables. I'll address that later. So keep variables in the back of your mind, but we use far too many or wrong variables in what we're showing. Formatting is a big deal, right? That graph that we've now looked at twice together, right? That graph is poorly formatted. The last one I showed you, right? This thing, if you could have an example of what bad formatting is, this would be in the dictionary under terrible formatting. What about baselines? Think about baselines. Look at this and say, what's the baseline for Asia? No idea. Like, how do you tell if it's going better or worse? Well, what's the baseline? Is it increasing off the baseline or decreasing? When you look at this, you have absolutely no clue. And yet, we do this all the time, right? We're also pretty good at doing feel good metrics. I've seen feel good metrics everywhere. Things like, hey, the number of vulnerabilities decreased. And it's just a chart of number of vulnerabilities on the vertical axis and then time on the horizontal, and the graph just goes down. I mean, that feels good, doesn't it? What does it say? Nothing. It just says nothing. It just tells you that the number is going down. Is there a reason for it? No idea. Right? Is it good or bad? No idea. It just feels good to have a graph going down. Right? So just because we have these things make us feel good and it means something to us. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's conveying the right message to your audience, or that they understand it, or that they're interpreting it the same way as you. That's the key. So let's talk about this. Trends up and to the right always feel great, right? It's like the Gartner Magic Quadrant. Hey, are we getting better? Oh, yeah, it's going up and to the right. Everything's great. Like, there are things in this world, mostly metrics and charts, that are worthless but pretty, right? My friend's dog, really cool dog, abjectly useless. Just sleeps around a lot. Uh, you guys starting to see the problem? Like, we have all this, we have all this data, we have all this stuff available to us, we have all these things going on, and it is impossible for us to explain what does it actually mean. And in this industry where sometimes potentially our livelihood depends on being able to convey a message, tell the right story, keep a tight narrative, and we can't do that, that is both tragic and unfortunate for our careers. But by the way, everybody does it. So let's talk about the importance of meaningful metrics. And if we, we used to say, if you can't express it, did it even happen? And so there's really three uses of effective metrics that I like to keep track of and I teach. The first one is setting a narrative. You want to tell the story, right? You want to tell the right story, even in light of bad things. Even when bad things are happening, you can still say the trend is going well. Yes, it's kind of like when companies lose money quarter over quarter over quarter over quarter, and their stock keeps going up. Why? Because they told a good story. The narrative is good. Yes, we're still growing despite that we lose $1 billion a month. Hello? OpenAI? Let's talk about the relationships between variables, right? So we've all seen effort versus outcome, right? So high effort, high outcome, low effort, low outcome. Maybe. What happens when they don't make sense? What happens when it comes out upside down? And how do you avoid that correlation causation trap? Just because two metrics appear to be going in the same direction, they appear to be related, doesn't necessarily mean they are. And sometimes you get on this thing where you plot, effort versus impact, and it's going in the right direction. And suddenly you get to a point and it goes completely upside down and it comes right back up. And you're like, well, what is that telling me? That tells me to avoid that data point, is what that tells me, right? But you have to avoid that correlation causation trap, especially when you're reporting metrics, because that can get real tricky real fast. We also maybe want to show progress and improvement. Look, in the things that we do, right? Historically, what do we want to show? We want to show that the effort cybersecurity, particularly AppSec people, are making is having a lower impact on the business quarter over quarter. It's helping you ship safer software, less vulnerabilities, requiring less effort, all those things. You want to show progress. You want to show things are getting better. You want to show that you've got a reduction in critical vulnerabilities. You want to show that things are on the up and up, right? How do we show reduction in critical vulnerabilities? In that first talk I had, I was going to try to go find that slide again, and I couldn't. And rather than take a screenshot, I figured I'd talk you through it. But I had this slide where I pulled it off of a client's presentation. It's got to be 12, 15 years ago, where he had number of vulnerabilities on the vertical axis and time, right, week during the year, 1 through 52, on the horizontal axis. And it started with like this crazy high number. Let's call it 10,000. And it slowly went down. Then it went down very quickly. Then suddenly it like tripled and went straight almost up, stayed up for 2 weeks, came down, went back up, went down, and then trended back up and then trended back down. He's like, hey, this is our trend map of critical vulnerabilities. And I looked at him and said, who are you giving that to? He's like, oh, leadership wants to see. And I asked him, like, what does that graph say? And he kind of stared at me for a moment, stared at his slide for a moment, stared back at me for a moment and said, I actually don't know, which is kind of scary. Because if you don't quite know what it's telling you, imagine what the kind of questions you're going to get when you're presenting this to somebody. So think about the increase in productivity, right? We want to be able to show increase in productivity. Hey, we're working smarter, not harder. Here's evidence of that. What about impact of new tools, right? Developers get new security tools all the time: static analysis, dynamic analysis, back when I was, rode dinosaurs and did AppSec. Um, all sorts of different capabilities now, runtime, all this other stuff that has an impact on productivity, has an impact on vulnerabilities, has an impact on overall developer well-being and happiness, all these things. Are we measuring the impact of tools? How would you even show that? And then the third thing you want to use good metrics for is to prove a point. And I like it when I'm able to use math and metrics to drive a point home. Oftentimes, I refer that as beating you over the head with data, because you ever have that discussion where somebody says that can't possibly be true. It's not going to work that way. And then you come back and you're like, well, here's empirical evidence of the following thing. And you're like, you can't not believe this. That just makes you a wacko. But here's evidence of this. But you have to structure that evidence in a way that makes sense. Like we've seen productivity loss because of, think about the last time a major vulnerability came out and every application developer had to halt for a moment while we evaluated and took apart all these apps and cleared that critical vulnerability. Maybe you didn't do that. Maybe you did that sparingly, or maybe you're wondering if you should have done that. But that's a productivity loss. Now I can tell a really good story with how many. Look, this is developers working. 10 developers release 10,000 lines of code every day. Great. We had this incident that dropped to 0 for 4 or 5 days. Right. That's bad impact. That's a lot of lost productivity. People care about that. Leadership cares about stuff like that. The impact of a backfill freeze. If somebody leaves and you can't backfill their chair, what does that do? Is there a good, what kind of impact does that have? How does that manifest? Do you get more vulnerabilities in your code? Do you have less engagement? Do you have to work extra hours? Like, how do you show that impact in a way that tells your story? Or maybe an error rate due to fatigue, right? You're suddenly said, hey, we've got to get these 4 apps out the door. You guys have no choice, but we got to get them done by Friday. Well, you introduce an error rate as a result. The error rate oftentimes goes up, right? So let's talk about how to make metrics effective, or how to make effective metrics. I think that there are a number of ways we can have a discussion about how to convey what you want to convey, how to get the right message across, how to get the right message across to the right people. And I've got some ideas. This is not perfect. This has served me well for a number of years, and I hope it serves you. So I have some ideas. This is stuff that I've essentially brought together from, the last very, very many years of doing this. And I think it'd be good to be able to talk through this. So here we go. Use concrete language. Right? What is concrete language? Right? Big, bigger, faster, better, more. That's not concrete. Right? Concrete language is precise. So if we take the word, we use the word better. Oh, this app is better on memory. Like, what does that mean? Better how? So if you can, instead of saying better, consider saying 10%. This uses 10% less memory, right? Does that make sense to you guys? Like to be able to do that. So you go from a squishy word to something that's much more concrete. And I think that conveys the point. And it does it without having to explain it later. So easier. All right. This app is easier to fix code in. Okay. What does that mean? If we say things like, hey, we're going to make a developer's lives easier, what does that mean? Well, maybe it translates into a lower error rate. Does that make sense? Nico, go get chocolate milk. 7% lower, 10% lower, 8% higher, right? So you have some kind of reference between A and B, and you're saying the graph is going up or the graph is going down, but by some percentage. So now you can extrapolate that and say, if I do this, I will have an additional, potentially this benefit or this result. If you say faster, what does faster mean? Nico, did you hear me? Faster as in average 2 days less. All right. We are enabling developers to work faster. So does that mean they can work more hours? No, we can say things like, well, instead of saying this makes us go faster, this helps decrease 2 days less between idea and delivery. That time is money in business. So saying I can drop 2 days out of a cycle, maybe 2 weeks, maybe 2 months, I don't know. But those are real meaningful metrics that have actual impact that would give you a much more concrete way of saying something rather than faster. How about that word more? We use it so often, but we say things like, "Oh yeah, we can do more with less." How about that one? You guys use that one a lot. Let's do more with less. More what with less what? How much more with how much less? So instead of saying more, we can say, okay, this will give me one additional sprint per year. In a lot of businesses, man, people would kill for that kind of statement. More is squishy. More is open to interpretation. One additional sprint per year, that's concrete. That translates into very real things like how much that translates into cash and capital, right? How much does that mean for money? And ultimately, what you're doing is you're having a real conversation, a concrete way of communicating between you, the person trying to communicate idea, and the person trying to learn, understand what the heck you're talking about, in a way that you see the same thing they see. You send, they receive, same exact data. Because when you say more, you may be thinking, 1,000% more, and they think more like 1% more, but there's no context, so you don't know. So next, you want to simplify the message, right? Simplicity is such an underrated thing. And again, I think because of the fact that we have spent a lot of time proving to the broader IT space and to our business constituents that we're really smart. We know what we're talking about. We should be listened to and heeded. We tend to overcomplicate things because there's a false correlation between complexity and intelligence. In fact, it's inverse. The more simple you are, the more intelligent you come across as. And it's there's a great quote: "Brevity is the essence of wit." Right? It's like I would have written more, but I didn't have enough time. Those are also good things, good quotes to kind of remember. But simplicity is important. Remove the extra noise. We tend to, like in that sales graph, there was so much junk out there that didn't make any sense. If you're trying to convey that sales is going up, throw out the regional the stuff. Let's just show a nice line graph. It's clean. It's easy to understand. It conveys the right message. So remove the extra noise. Know the exact narrative you're trying to tell. And be really precise about it. If you're trying to explain that productivity went up as a result of deploying a tool, know exactly how you're going to convey that. Are you saying that developers spend less time in security technologies? Are you saying that they can take longer lunches? Are you saying that they can get more code done? Are you saying it's a volumetric thing or a job satisfaction thing? Like, know the exact thing you're trying to say. And then, of course, quickly get to the point. Because if you can't get to the point, people tune out, right? These long, meandering explanations. I watched somebody try to present a 27 graphs of why security needs to spend more, why they need more budget. And I'm pretty sure that they could have done that in 1 or 2 slides. But like halfway through it, the recipients just sort of, the drill. You just pull your phone out, you pretend to check a message, and then you just don't leave, and you look up every once in a while and make sure that they're still there and the meeting hasn't ended, and you just kind of roll your eyes and you go back to your thing. Like, simplicity, get to the point, know what your narrative is. Employ math. Math is very important, right? There's nothing that I think is more universal than math, and being able to have numbers and simple formulas. There's that simplicity again. I'm big on simplicity, right? So show your work. There's nothing quite like, and my kids are realizing this in school. My son can do crazy math in his head, but the teacher asks a complex math equation, a question. He just writes the answer and he gets a low grade. He's like, what the hell? My answer is right there. And they're like, yes, but you didn't show me how you got there. Particularly in cyber, because it's such a, I'll simply say, often gray area. We tend to, I don't say exaggerate, but yeah, exaggerate outputs, results, negatives, positives, all those things. Because we do that, you want to be able to show your work. How did you get that number? How did you get 10%? Right? How did you get 1,000 here and 200 here? What happened here on graphs? Have that knowledge. And by the way, try to avoid as much as possible, like the plague, magic. I say that because there's a lot of times where you look at a graph, you're like, how did you even get that from your environment? Like we get this, I've seen one particular graph from a vendor, and I always like to laugh at vendors because we put out some hilarious things. If you've ever seen a vendor ROI presentation on whatever it is you're buying from them, you know what I mean, right? If you buy vendors, customers who bought this product had a 700% ROI, and the only thing that ever goes through anybody's brain is what magic did you use to get to that number? Because they'll never show you the formula they use because it's a guesstimate at best, and it's usually, pardon my French, bullshit. So no magic, right? Don't be that. Have concrete evidence for what you're saying. It's very, very important to be believable. Choose your variables wisely. Um, I have seen many a discussion that was going in the right direction, leading in the right narrative, terribly derailed by a bad choice of variables. That's unfortunate. By the way, I said it already previously. I'm going to repeat it, and I'm going to repeat it probably at least one more time. Baselines are critical. Know what zero looks like. When you say things are going up or things are going down or they're getting better or worse than what? What is your baseline, right? It's super important to have that in play because otherwise you won't understand what it is that you're looking at. And consistency is key. You want to be consistent with what you're talking about. And what I mean by that is whatever story you're telling, use the same language, the same variables, the same measurements, the same axes throughout, right? Don't show 7 different formats of a graph to tell the same story. It'll confuse people. And believe me, you don't want that. And again, avoid the correlation versus causation trap. Just because 2 metrics correlate or 2 variables correlate does not necessarily mean that they are there's cause for putting them together or sticking them together. That happens a lot. And if you're thinking, well, that's confusing, right? I have more. Support your narrative. So metrics are really about telling a story. We have a narrative, and you have a narrative in your head. You have something you want to say. Know that what you want to say. Know how you're going to get there, and know the difference between supporting your narrative and blowing your own narrative up. I have seen people that have great graphs and they start talking about what data they use to get there. And then suddenly somebody says, hey, yeah, but that doesn't, like that happened, didn't it? So how did that impact it? And they go off in a slightly different direction. They'll talk about an outside factor, something that's not included in their narrative, an outside factor like, I don't know, sunspots or, COVID or what that impact. But we're talking about tools and productivity. What does hiring have to do with that? Like nothing. Like leave that over here. But as soon as you latch onto that, you get derailed, and your narrative goes to hell. Don't fudge the data. 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 Otherwise, don't like. There's a great quote. Numbers don't lie to people that make them up do. So don't do that. Right? I've seen far too many of these where somebody says, I don't think that's correct. Can you show me how you got that? And then they're forced to go look at the source, and then the number is different. or the output is different, and suddenly everything you put on screen is questioned, right? Data should support your story. Your data should be your story. Because I tell you what, in real life, numbers go up, numbers go down, things get better, things get worse. It's just life. And, even the stock market, your 401k account, your health, things fluctuate over time. As long as you have a trend in the positive direction. So think about the narrative and the long-term data that you have. The trend is the important thing, right? But know what you're talking about. And then ensure relevance. And I put this last because I can't underscore it enough. This is one of the most important things to me when it comes to creating graphs and metrics. Does this matter to them? Does my CISO care about the number of vulnerabilities in a third-party application? Maybe. Does your CIO? Possibly. Does your CRO? Probably not. What kinds of things matter to them? It may be the same branch or the same concept, but you have to present it in a different way. So rather than saying the number of critical vulnerabilities, you can kind of skew that towards, well, that produces downtime. Downtime is bad. Downtime costs money. Look, this could produce downtime. Well, that they care about, right? Because that's productivity loss. So know your audience's perspective. Know what they're coming from. Lawyers have a very direct perspective on things, right? It's very black and white. Is this legal or is this not? Finance people care about numbers and cash. Lawyers care about right and wrong. Managers care about things being delivered on time and on budget, right? So know your audience's perspective, and it'll help you understand how to present the message you have to them. The technical or the non-technical presentation, I will tell you, generally speaking, this is just kind of a rule of thumb to keep in the back of your head. Generally speaking, the level of technicality that you're presenting is best at your level and your peers or below you, or kind of below you. I mean, like in terms of org chart. Because the higher up you go, your manager, their manager, their manager, their manager, their manager, the level of abstraction generally gets higher, and it ratchets up every time you go up. So your boss probably maybe at the same technical level of you, but probably not. They're not going to care at the exact same technical level as you. That person's boss, even less technical. That person's boss, probably not technical at all. They want different words to convey the same message. And so knowing your audience is super important, what they care about, their perspective, how they want to hear the information that you're conveying, in what context, what that they care about, and how do you then add liken that, right? What you're saying to what they want to, what they care about, and drive that together. So now let's talk about, I've got a brief metrics checklist for you. And this is meant to be much more interactive than this is. So again, I'll apologize, but this is the kind of a metrics checklist. So this is a handy reference for what I call decent metrics. Not great. What is the message? That's the first and foremost. What is your message? What are you trying to convey? Are you trying to convey that you need more budget? Are you trying to convey that you need more staff? Are you trying to convey that you need more tools? Are you trying to convey that you are doing better? Are you trying to convey that you are too tired? Are you what is the message you're trying to convey? Start with that, write it down, take a piece of paper, for those of you old school, or your iPad with stylus, write that message down. What is the message you're trying to convey? That's the foundation. And then go, okay, what are the things, what variables do I have in my environment that help me drive that message, to convey that message? If you're talking about productivity, there are 1,000 things you can pick. But remember, you want consistency. So you want something that's available across the company. If not every department tracks how much code a developer releases per day, it doesn't make sense to use that variable because you can't track it across every team. Does that make sense? So understanding your variables is super important. And then, is this simple for the audience? Not just is this simple. I kind of ratcheted that up and took it a step further, because just because you think it's simple doesn't mean your audience thinks it's simple. And think about it this way: will my audience react to this the same way as I am? And can I give this slide or this graph to the person that's my target audience and have them understand it without me having to explain it? That is exceptionally difficult to get right, but it is something I promise you want to strive for, because it is one of those things where you're not going to be around in every conversation. You're not going to be around in every meeting. If your boss pulls up a slide that you and your boss just talked about to how to get more budget for your team, and your boss puts that slide on screen and somebody looks at it and goes, what is that saying? I don't get it. It's a miss. So it's got to be simple for the audience. Is the message quantitative? No feel good metrics, no squishy, better, more, faster, easier, right? Is it quantitative? Is it 10% higher, 7% lower, 4 days faster, 3 days slower, 10 more vulnerabilities, 35 less? Use quantitative numbers, right? Quantity is in volume, speak loudly. Being able to show graphs that have numbers behind them is very important. And is it framed properly? So, as you're talking and creating these metrics and creating your story that you're saying, is it framing what you want to say properly? So, you have your core message, you have the variables that support it, but then there's all this, think about a picture frame, right? All the stuff that's around it that you're using, the words that you're using, things that support your narrative. Is the metric you're presenting framed properly? For example, are you trying to talk about productivity post COVID while using during COVID metrics? That may not work, because the world was different for a very short period of, well, felt like forever, but for a short period of time. Are we talking about before AI or after AI? Right? So make sure you have the framing right, as the interpretation can be dramatically different. And I think that's how those are to me, those are the shortcuts for getting from A to B, from complicated, hard to understand, hard to interpret metrics is something that's simple, conveys a message, makes it easy to understand, and actually gets your point across in a way that is worth your time and their time. So now you know, and as I used to say as a kid, knowing is half the battle. That's me. If you guys follow the podcast, if you don't, I'd love some more listeners. We're going through and talking about AI right now on a series with one of your locals, John Dixon, down there. We've got a couple of series. The first part came out today. That QR code is safe, I promise. No link needed. So thanks for your time, you guys. I hope you got something out of this. And if you want the slides, I'll leave this up for a minute if anybody wants to grab that QR code. Questions about the pod, questions about the slides. Anybody? I don't know if you guys have a way to field questions. And again, sorry for not being there in person.
So, does anybody have any questions in the room or online? I think you can come off mute now online too.
Yeah, questions, comments, heckles.
Nothing right now in here. No.
I have stunned them into silence, Kyle.
Stun them with all this information that they have to get. I will say, I mean, I agree with a lot of your stuff on the metrics to make sure you know your audience, make sure you get the right answer that you want, and always be careful that whatever slide you give to your boss, he may pass it up the line, so make sure he can explain it too.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I guess we can.
Evan, you had something for us?
Yeah. I can't figure out how to raise the hand on Slack.
I see you
on Zoom anymore. I was thinking back to earlier in my career when I was trying to figure out my own metrics for different teams and departments, and we talk about this a lot. I think last con 2 years ago there was someone talking about her metrics that she showed in the presentation, and I'm kind of just left after listening. It's like, what do you think is the barrier that's preventing folks from having a good, or maybe not folks individually, but our industry or segment from having these metrics, just like you would have in the sales, like sales, they have their funnel metrics and they have
Yeah,
this to me still feels like we are searching for something, even foundational metrics to start our business on. Whereas someone coming out of an
we
MBA
are.
program has it, has a good set to start from.
Yeah, we are. Here is why. This is my this is an opinion. Does not, I'll say, does not represent anybody but myself. I think it's a combination of arrogance and ignorance. Here's what I mean.
Okay.
Um, this industry has grown up and we may be like my generation may be the problem, where we grew up.
We hope.
um, so with this mentality of only we understand this. You normals don't know what you're doing. Just listen to me and let me just take over, right? And let me show you the right way. That's the arrogance part. The ignorance part comes from like, why do I care what business people think? They're dumb anyway. They don't understand security. Hey, folks, they sign paychecks and POs. Like they drive business. They need to understand. By the way, the other thing that a lot of folks don't understand in our industry or seem to uh, fail to really capitalize on is that business makes risk decisions all day, every day. Like that's how business operates. And as a result of that, like we are just a variable into their risk calculations. Like we're not going to move the number. So those two things create this, maybe it's a mentality, maybe it's a sense of entitlement that like, we don't learn good, good conveyance of data. We don't learn how to have effective communication with people that aren't us, that don't think the same way we do. And I tell you, the evidence of that is as my career kind of takes me out of the trenches of security and just running business and running like just working with companies. Um, I start to look at the way people talk and go, I have no idea what you're saying. That's weird. That you were me 10 years
Mhm.
ago, and now I don't understand what's going on. Now that can't be good because I'm like I used to be part of this. The fact that now I'm losing touch, that's probably not a good sign for
Yeah.
either me or whoever's talking to me. So I think it's a combination of arrogance, ignorance. I really think we should teach um, communication and data driven communication in this industry, and we do not. And that's sad.
Have you found any good resources to help? Obviously we're mostly an AppSec community here, but that
Yeah,
helps people translate some of these items or examples. Like I had a VP I used to work with, and she said you have to have the whole picture, the total quality picture of
yeah.
of it. You have to know what you're going to measure before you even go about doing it. What are going to
Mm.
be outcomes? And I've never
I tell
seen a
you what,
framework
man.
or a learning launch pad that helps folks. Yeah.
I haven't necessarily. That's why I create these decks to try to contribute to some corpus of knowledge. I mean, literally, this is just me writing down musings of things that I wish somebody would have told me earlier in my
Yeah.
career.
No.
Um,
Same.
like you don't have to listen to me, but you'll be having this discussion with yourself in 10 years. Like somebody will tell you this. Like I sat in a CTO's office and said, "Well, there's 10 vulnerabilities in this. They're all 10 are critical. We can't release this." And he said, "Yes, I can. I can also fire you." And I was like, "Okay, that's not the outcome I thought it was going to happen. Like, what is that like? How did we get there?" Right? Then he said, anytime somebody sits you down and said, "Listen, son, like you guys are in Texas, you know what follows, right? Like it's an ass kicking that's about to happen, and sometimes it's in a polite way, sometimes not so much." Um, but I had a CTO sit me down and when I worked at G and said, "Listen, son, let me explain to you how business works." And I was like, "What do you mean people don't listen to the cyber people when we say you can't do that?" They're like, "We can, and we do, and we will." Right? Like we make these risk decisions every day. Like this is not the language you're using is different. The type of thing is different. But like poke you with stick and you bleed is still bad, no matter what language it's in, or whether it's in or self-driving car or poison in your food. Like bad things are bad things. Put it in the right context. I would say I've looked at some like MBA level coursework And oddly enough, I found if you guys read two books that absolutely were page turners for me that I couldn't read fast enough that have helped me, and it's both of the it's a Dubner, it's Freakonomics. They're old books now,
Yeah.
but it's a way of quantitatively understanding the hidden side of everything. Dubner's even got a podcast. Things that like don't mentally correlate, but you learn how to identify things that could, correlate, make sense. To me, that's a good one, mainly because it helps. It helps me like mentally frame things. But yeah, I don't have a great answer for that, Evan. I wish I did. If somebody finds one, by all means, shout it from the rooftops. Post it everywhere you can.
Yeah, the worst things I see is a lot of the some of the boilerplate programs or they're coming out with, and they just spit up the old, like some what you showed on the slides, these old metrics that people have heard of and seen. They may feel comfortable because they've seen something like that, but they really don't say anything about how your business is functioning or what your risk that you're trying to make a decision on really needs to be thinking about. Like it leaves us in this void space of bad starting picture or bad lessons to start from, and not having an
Yeah,
incomplete understanding of how we need to communicate to the right audiences.
yeah,
But,
yeah.
well, thank you. Thank you.
We do have one question in the room here at least. So Karen.
Hello, thank you for your talk. I
Thank
have
you.
can you give us a few specific examples of good metrics from the security team perspective?
Sure. So from the security team's perspective, okay. So I will give you. I think productivity is a good one. Quantifying productivity in terms of um, what we do in terms of our impact to the company's productivity, and what that means is how many times you can kind of quantify this. And I can't give you an exact one because it's going to be different for every company. But just an example. Say you make a I don't know, a website that houses that stores customers sensitive medical history information, and uh, at some point, right, you had X number of vulnerabilities, and you were saying, hey, we need to get these done, we need to get these could potentially cause issues, and then you could somehow correlate that to the fact that the company had to shut down for several months because one of those vulnerabilities was exploited. So now you've got at least a link. All right, we got to explore the causation correlation trap, but at least now you've got a link between something that's concrete on our side, the number of vulnerabilities that were critical vulnerabilities that were released into the wild, and a catastrophic loss of productivity. Like finding that link is going to be important. And again, no magic, but trying to find a way to establish a link there will drive is a good way to look at it. I like productivity in terms of unplanned downtime. How often do we have a vulnerability that is risk accepted and then causes that specific issue causes direct downtime to the company, and how much at some point later? Those are hard metrics that hurt at the board level, but we don't necessarily think of. So we think how many vulnerabilities went out into the wild, like this is bad, or how many of them got exploited. That's usually where we stop. What we don't go to is how much pain did that cause the company in terms of how much lost revenue, how much lost productivity, right? Your reputation, you can't really quantify it very well. You can quantify things like their value. Now the trap there is shareholder value. Stocks after a major incident always drop, but with very few exceptions, they always go back. Right? They always come back. Investors always come back. So something to think about. But does that help?
Yeah, she says yes. Sorry, I took the microphone. All right. Well, thanks, Rafi. Raf, this has been a good presentation.
Appreciate you guys.
Whatever.
Thanks for dealing with me remote, Kyle.
Thanks for doing this. Okay, so hope to hear and see you all next month. We'll have James Wickett talking about SAST and some new directions that he's come up with. And that's about it. Thanks, y'all. See y'all next month.
Bye-bye.